Welcome to Mindly Way, where we explore life philosophies to grow and find the right path. Get ready to listen for an inner journey. Buddha is recognized as the founder of Buddhism and was also a philosopher and spiritual guide. In Lumbini, Nepal, he was born as Siddhartha Gautama into an aristocratic family in 566 BC, and at the age of 29, he departed from the comforts of his home in order to the purpose of the suffering he witnessed in the world, to look for a life beyond this one, and demise. He realized after 6 years of self-loathing that the path to divinity lies not in material possessions, but in the mind. So he gave up on the path of self-loathing and sat in attentive meditation under a Bodhi tree. With the rising of the morning star on the May full moon, Siddhartha Gautama transformed into Buddha, the one who has awakened. The Buddha wandered the plains of northeastern India for the next 45 years, teaching the Dharma or path. That moment he had realized the central themes of Buddha's teachings are suffering or dukkha and the cessation of dukkha, which is thought to be the nirvana state. The three marks of existence are among the philosophy's most important lessons, which three identities are listed in the following order. 1. Anicca, which indicates that life is continuously changing. We've already produced a video on this, and the description contains a link to it. 2. Dukkha, which denotes that life is unpleasant and brings about suffering. And lastly, 3. Anatta, which implies that the individual is ever evolving. The Buddha journeyed to Sarnath in the modern district after attaining enlightenment of Varanasi, where he had practiced with and given his alms to 5 monks before the Four Noble Truths from the first sermon. The cornerstones of Buddhism are these Four Noble Truths, which raise consciousness of suffering as a part of life, its source, and strategies for surviving without it. To help you better understand dukkha, the second mark of existence, we will discuss it in this video. The suffering that each of us experiences and how these Four Noble Truths can help us deal with suffering in the life we lead today. Management of suffering. The following are the Four Noble Truths. 1. The reality of dukkha. Dukkha's reality. What is the noble truth of suffering? Asks the Buddha. Suffering comes in many forms, from birth to aging to illness to being cut off from a loved one. To put it succinctly, the 5 categories impacted by clinging are suffering, and not getting what one wants is suffering, are in pain. Dukkha's truth is the first truth. The word suffering is dukkha. All life involves inevitable, unavoidable suffering, said the Buddha. Every life includes unavoidable, inevitated suffering. That suffering could manifest as discomfort, disease, or a trauma that we can all imagine, such as receiving a terminal illness diagnosis, having the stomach flu, or breaking your arm. For instance, even though giving birth is meant to be a happy event, both, at first, the mother and child experience some kind of physical discomfort. He continues by discussing suffering resulting from more common but milder types of discomfort and anguish, such as extended work days, being disappointed by a spouse, feeling irritated, dissatisfied, wounded, insufficient, melancholy, furious, and so forth. He takes into account the pain resulting from even the smallest mental strain, restlessness, a feeling of constriction, obsession, uneasiness, boredom, and an isolated feeling, fear of growing older, the feeling that something is lacking in life, or that something is simply unfulfilling, etc. Buddha is only emphasizing that suffering exists. He never denied that there was joy in our lives. It is a normal aspect of life that we experience some level of suffering in. A native part of our existence is suffering our lives from little moments to terrible events from time to time. Since we're all always looking for happiness, we fail to see that life is actually a blend of joy and suffering. The Buddha desires that we recognize this so that, in the event that we do suffer, we don't take it personally or with such shock value. Rather than acknowledging this essential reality, we turn to drugs and alcohol to lessen the suffering caused by losing a loved one, utilize procedures and cosmetics to consequences of growing older. Since suffering is unpleasant, we could choose to ignore or downplay it in our own lives. We place the blame for our poor career or relationship decisions on both external factors and ourselves. In addition, the culture in which we live frequently overlooks the daily agony brought on by poverty, disease, stress associated with working, growing older, and passing away, while our media constantly parade of assurances that you can improve your internet speed, look younger, and avoid suffering, relationship, consuming beer, taking medication, trimming down, etc. When we begin to accept that suffering is a normal aspect of life, we are at ease even in the most trying times, because eventually this suffering will turn back into contentment. 2. The Samudaya truth. The real Satchudaya. The Buddha said, A noble truth, the source of suffering is this. It is the craving that results in rejuvenation and is accompanied by lust and enjoyment and taking pleasure in this, and that is the yearning for being, the craving for non-being, or the craving for sensual desires. Thankfully, Buddha did not abandon us with the knowledge of suffering being the only noble truth in this life. Additionally, he imparted to us the second, third, and fourth noble truths, which are to determine why we suffer, what needs to be done to free ourselves from all suffering. To arrive there, Samudaya, the second noble truth, is the source or cause of suffering, or unhappiness. Buddha tells us that our suffering is not caused by the things that happen to us, but rather of our psychological condition. Many things in our daily lives may seem to be the root of our suffering, such as not eating when you're hungry, hurting yourself when you fall off a bike, or your significant other departing from you. Buddha instructs us to disregard the specifics of any given suffering, that there are three primary sources of suffering and unsatisfactory experiences in life, which he called these the three poisons, or three detrimental aspects of the psyche, that the three poisons negative mental characteristics that the majority of the world's problems, as well as the majority of our own. Among the three poisons are cravings are an expression of our need, greed, or desire. Cravings, wanting, greed, or desire. Here, the Buddha emphasizes the importance of cravings and states that there are three distinct varieties of cravings. 1. Sensational pleasure cravings, for example, indicate that we have a desire to please our senses, delectable cuisine, or soothing music. 2. Craving to be someone you're not. This indicates that we yearn to be someone else, to our identities, such as celebrities, influencers, or successful business owners. And 3. Craving of not to be. This denotes a desire to prevent something from occurring or obtain, get rid of something, like the pain following a fall. Aversion, or our hatred of things that go against who we are or what we believe, is the second poison. Aversion of our hatred directed against. If someone's beliefs don't satisfy them, or if those beliefs make them feel threatened, they may harm other people, them by their deeds. Ignorance or delusion is the third poison. One consistently chooses to ignore the reality of life. For example, ignoring the transience of life or failing to the essential nature of reality in order to shield personal convictions or avarice. These three poisons are pictured in Buddhism at the center of the Bhava Chakra, also called as the wheel of life, a metaphor for the miseries of samsara, the cycle of reincarnation, life's wheel, and demise. Hatred is portrayed as a snake, delusion as a pig, and craving as a rooster. Crucially, they are mutually dependent. Each animal eats the other's tail end, creating a self-destructive cycle of interdependence. We encounter this vicious cycle of all three poisons on a daily basis from both external sources, as well as internally. For example, our desire to acquire materialistic items and increase our income fuels greed and displays animosity and rage toward anything that deprives them of those comforts. Ignoring all advice, one will go above and beyond to accomplish those goals. Otherwise, the Buddha preached that those whose perception of life is clouded by ignorance, greed, and aversion condemn themselves to keep spinning on this wheel, only to die, cannot achieve nirvana, since they will always return to this state of suffering in their next life. Three wholesome or positive attitudes that are necessary to liberate are in opposition to these three poisons. 3 wholesome, attain nirvana, and free oneself from this agonizing cycle of reincarnations. These are wisdom, compassion, and generosity, and all Buddhist activities are aimed at eliminating or reducing the poisons and fostering the development of these virtues. 3. The Nirodha truth. The real deal of Nirodha, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, is this, according to the Buddha, is the total absence of that particular craving, giving it up, rejecting it, and becoming free of it. Separating oneself from it, withdrawing from it. The Buddha spent 6 years learning the truth about suffering and its causes, devoted to coming to the understanding that suffering has an end. In the end, he discovered that eliminating suffering at its source would put an end to it all, which is to eradicate all ignorance, malice, and desire. Nirodha, the third noble truth, thus alludes to giving up craving and letting go. Let go of the mental need to put an end to pain. This specific truth transforms the Buddha's teachings from a theoretical exercise to a call to self-transformation. We need to recognize what it is that we are truly craving in order to stop craving it. Acknowledge that nothing can ever fully satisfy one's needs if it is not genuinely permanent. When one realizes who they are, their cravings end and their suffering ends. Craving is a fantasy that mimics and exaggerates reality rather than the actual thing. A person's desires are not their actual reality. Giving into our cravings and desires is an easy concept to grasp. Realizing and letting go of our desires, however, is a very different story and a challenging condition to reach. Consider a person who knows they should stop smoking cigarettes but does so out of habit. They struggle to quit smoking, though, and they keep smoking. According to Buddha, cravings can be satisfied in the same way that seeking help from a therapist or other. Ending craving is possible. Group informs a smoker that quitting can be beneficial by showing them that it can. Carried out, it necessitates that a person have a mental state that can identify and comprehend the significance of their pain, the reason behind their cigarette craving, and the ways in which that craving is increasing their agony. By acknowledging and considering one's feelings and behaviors, as well as by considering the reasons behind them, seeing past the feelings experienced can provide light on the underlying causes of one's suffering. Above all, this facilitates comprehension of the connection between desire and pain. For example, when someone misplaces a tangible item or their vehicle sustains damage, they go through dukkha. However, what if that individual thought back on the feeling and questioned themselves, such as, what causes this suffering and why? Why was I feeling bonded to this thing? How come I feel this way? And why am I suffering because of this act? These stimulating questions give people a better understanding of how our minds create cravings and attachments, as well as how to let go of these emotions. This might begin with something as minor as not feeling unhappy when we misplace a tangible item or miss a deadline. As an alternative, one can cultivate a serene and calm mindset regardless of the outcomes. Once such knowledge and insight are attained, one can ultimately let go of cravings and wishes. 4. The reality of Magga. Magga is reality. The last words spoken by Buddha in this video are, what is the path that leads to the end of pain and suffering? It's the Noble Eightfold Path, comprising of correct viewpoint, correct thinking, correct speech, the proper course of action, way of life, effort, mindfulness, and reflection. The term Magga, which means the path and refers to Buddha's middle way in the fourth truth, managing life. The end of suffering is discussed in the third noble truth, but this fourth noble truth discusses the route that will lead to the goal of putting an end to suffering. According to the Buddha, there is a way to avoid craving and suffering, and he refers to this route as the middle path, which achieves nirvana. This middle route strikes a balance between excessive indulgence and severe poverty, and denying ourselves the items we want. In order to follow the middle way, one must let go of their desires. Buddha never advocated for lacking ambition or desire. He advises us to embrace the concept of just enough and to avoid becoming attached to these desires and adopt a more sustainable, well-balanced way of living. This route necessitates a drastic change in perspective and way of thinking. It is not a quick fix of the globe. This route follows a set of guidelines and precepts that result in the end of suffering, as it centers on the Eightfold Path, the 8 interdependent elements that lead to Eightfold Trail, to fresh perspectives and comprehension, and is distinguished by wisdom and discipline. 3 disciplines make up the Eightfold Path: prajna, sila, and the wisdom path, the path of morality, and samadhi, the path of mental discipline. The 3 disciplines point in the direction of a way where one can finally become free from samsara. 8 practice areas comprise the 3 disciplines. Each area is a component of a wheel, Dharma wheel with 8 spokes. The wisdom path, or prajna, is described as part of the Eightfold Path of the Buddha. Right view, which prioritizes comprehension, is what we have, and learning about the real world, and right intention refers to giving and selfless farts. Right speech falls under sila, the ethical path, and it always involves indulging in communication that is unbiased and fosters harmony. Taking morally upright actions while avoiding harming others is known as right action. The concept of right livelihood refers to earning a living through deeds and labor that do no harm others. Additionally, we have under samadhi, the path of mental discipline, putting forth the proper effort, developing and practicing virtues, and refraining from practicing traits that are self-centered. Being mindful and aware of one's body is a mental state known as right mindfulness. Behaviors, ideas, and the ability to focus on the task at hand with the right amount of is connected to engaging in meditation activities. Buddha holds that the wheel's significance is paramount. It indicates that every area of practice has equal significance and has no beginning or end. Ultimately, and when practiced simultaneously, every area aids the others and enables us to use the 3 doors attentively: our body, mind, and speech. Buddha said that when we practice mindful use of our body, speech, and mind, it would lead to happiness in the now and the future by assisting us in abstaining from negative behaviors. Consequently, it would end needless suffering by exercising self-control over our speech, body, and mind to benefit others rather than do harm them, and put an end to suffering by seeking wisdom. True happiness can therefore only be attained by a personal effort. If you like this video, please see our complete set of life philosophies, playlist, and additional videos that use age-old philosophical ideas to help you achieve success and happiness. Wisdom, don't neglect to sign up. I really appreciate you watching.